Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our monthly Lunch and Learn. Every month, we try to do a Lunch and Learn where we go over different victims' rights or different things that we think the community should know, or maybe would in the future have a need to know in this formatting where it's searchable and it's easy to share and it's easy to grab in case it is needed. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about the differences between the services that MCVRC provides and our local state's attorney's office. Every county has a local state's attorney's office, so we can talk a little bit more about that formatting. Joining us today is uh, MCVRC staff Blanche and Alondra, and Jamie Sterling, who is the state's attorney's office in St. Mary's County. Thank you guys for joining us. I'll do a round robin, and you guys can introduce yourself, and then we can go right into the questions. Alondra?
Good afternoon. My name is Alondra. I am the Assistant Director of Victim Services here at MCVRC.
Hi, everyone. My name is Blanche Hampton. I'm a senior staff attorney here at MCVRC representing crime victims in Baltimore, Carroll, and Howard counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Sterling, and I'm the elected state's attorney for St. Mary's County.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. I wanted to also add that Alondra and Blanche both also served at a state's attorney's office. So I think that we've got a great arsenal of information here today. So let's just hop right in. What are some of the general responsibilities of the state's attorney's office?
So the state's attorney's office is responsible for prosecution of cases, and that can start after charges are filed. So charges can be filed by way of a citizen complaint or a grand jury indictment, or a police officer, or if the police decide to go to a commissioner and file for charges. Sometimes we can start an investigation as well, but generally our cases really start after there's an arrest or probable cause is already found. We can assist the police in trying to get those investigations, like I was commenting on, whether it's by subpoenas or having witnesses come before grand jury. But after that happens, we kind of get the ball rolling. We represent the community and crime victims, of course, and then we process that prosecution through the court system. Sometimes those cases result in a conviction. Sometimes there are plea offers. Sometimes there are other things that we can, if there's like a diversionary program or something like that, we can resolve it in that regard. And then even after the case is completed, meaning after there's a conviction and after there's a sentence, my particular office, and I actually should have started by saying that it probably is somewhat inappropriate for me to make a comment as to every state's attorney's office in the state. But as far as how the process works in St. Mary's County, I feel like it's probably more appropriate for me to comment on it because every state's attorney's office is represented by a different elected official. So each office, that elected state's attorney has the prerogative to handle their office the way that they wish to. And so in our office, we will get involved in the post-trial process as well. So with parole hearings and such as those, our office will get involved in those hearings. I don't believe every state's attorney's office in the state does that. And again, it's just every state's attorney's office can kind of handle things that they want.
Thanks for that, Jamie. Did you ladies want to add to, since you guys have different experiences at the state's attorney's offices?
So I worked at the Prince George's County State Attorney's Office as a bilingual victim witness coordinator. Probably a bit more busier than St. Mary's, so I was running around, floating around, translating for Spanish-speaking victims and or witnesses. So that's my main role as a victim advocate at the State Attorney's Office.
So I would just say that Attorney Sterling essentially covered everything. Obviously, she would be the expert on what a state's attorney's office does and doesn't do. So I think she covered everything with regard to the prosecution of criminal cases on behalf of the state of Maryland.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. So there's different types of victim services that are being provided. Jamie was saying that they do some post-conviction work as well. What are some other victim services that are offered? And you mentioned that it's not the same across all states attorneys' offices. So I guess, those of you at home, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your local state's attorney's office based on your county. But what other victim services are provided directly from the state's attorney's office, Jamie?
So there are several different services. We have a pretty amazing grant through the Governor's Office of Crime Control Prevention, and it funds most of our victim witness programming. I would say it probably funds like 80% of it. Prior to me taking office, we did not have a victim witness unit. I brought that on once I won my election in 2023, and originally we had approximately 6 positions that were grant funded. We have absorbed almost one fully. And what we do with some of those services, like in that grant, we also requested funds for treatment, trying to get victims of crime treatment, mental health treatment, in addition to therapy. We also, for a short time, kind of explored the companion care opportunities for having, like we had a bunny, we had a cat, a dog, and we did that in-house where we contracted with an organization and we utilized that grant so that victims could feel more comfortable prepping for trial, or just if they wanted to talk to one of the victim advocates or even with one of the attorneys. Each office is different. I know Anne Arundel County is probably one of the leading counties. And although I'm not the state's attorney there, I did practice there for a couple years, and it's really where I saw just the really great innovation that they have. It was the whole courthouse. They actually have canine companion care on site, where they have canines for therapy to assist in the hearings, which I think is phenomenal. So the dogs they're trained and they have a handler. They can sit with the victims, and you can imagine particularly wonderful for trauma victims or children, because you're walking into a courtroom, it might be nerve-wracking, and just things like that, thinking outside the box and coming up with different ways that we can assist crime victims. And I'm sure out of the 23 counties in Baltimore City, there's got to be more innovative things that other offices are doing, but specifically I can kind of touch on those.
That sounds really fantastic, especially for young people. And I think that people that are unfamiliar with, the court system, like it's so extremely intimidating for those who are not versed in the things that are going on, which is why both the state's attorney's office and the services that we provide are just so valuable. So if the state's attorney's office is prosecuting these cases, do their victim advocates also do court accompaniment?
100% in our cases we do. So in the district court, we have currently 3 positions, and there is an advocate for every docket. I actually just got done handling a district court docket today. We have at least one advocate in the courtroom. Usually with, I would say, the criminal cases for sure. Traffic cases, we sometimes will have an advocate there. Usually there aren't victims in those cases. If there are, then we will have an advocate available. In the circuit court, it's 100%. The circuit court cases are felonies. They're much more serious. They're going to meet with the advocates prior to trial. They'll probably have had dozens of phone calls, text messages, and emails back and forth from the advocates. The advocate is really there to liaise between the attorneys, help assist through the court process, but also just have like a familiar voice and a familiar face to help them through the very long and traumatic court proceeding process from start to finish.
That's fantastic. Have you, Alondra and Blanche, have you found that to be true for other counties as well? Or is that somewhere where MCVRC has been able to step in as far as court accompaniment and helping with victim services?
So in my experience, well, the counties that I work in, generally only provide victim advocates with regard to homicide cases and sexual assault cases. Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center provides representation as well as victim advocates for victims of all types of crime. So that's one distinction there. And as I said, it's just in the counties that I work for, I work in. State's Attorney Sterling indicating that advocates are provided for district court cases of all kinds, as well as circuit court cases, is definitely reassuring to hear.
Say that, excuse me, at my time at the PG County State Attorney's Office, we did have an advocate at the Hyattsville Courthouse for district court cases, along with an advocate for district court cases in the Upper Marlboro Courthouse. Now, when it gets to circuit court, it gets a little bit more hectic, right? Because you have just so many cases and you only have maybe 10 to 12 coordinators or advocates in that state attorney's office. So it can be a little bit, how do I say, you don't receive that one-on-one experience that I think MCVRC can really provide, specifically our advocates, right? They can go to court and provide that court accompaniment and sit with you throughout that trial, throughout that sentencing hearing, where maybe in the PG County State Attorney's Office, it could be a little bit difficult just because of the amount of caseload they have.
Yeah, I can imagine that volume just being really hard to provide services to everybody, which is unfortunate, but we do the best that we can, I think. So if anyone is kind of needing a little bit more extra assistance, just based on the caseload of the state's attorney's office, we're available to assist as needed. So what are some,
maybe kind of piggyback on that too? I think it's important also to get in contact with victims right away. So we try to reach out so long as the police are able to give us a contact number, an email, or some kind of cell phone or something. My office actually reaches out prior to the bail review. So we will reach out immediately to see what the position is of the victim and that we can communicate any concerns to the court. So immediately after arrest, immediately before the defendant gets a bail review, our office reaches out to the victim so that we could say clearly on the record, we can say, Your Honor, we spoke with the victim, he or she is terrified. They want the defendant to be held without bond. If the court is inclined to release them, we want them to have no contact. And we make those positions very clear. I think it's critical for the courts to hear that information because, as you can imagine, it is traumatic for the victim, but also it's dangerous if a defendant is released, especially in instances of domestic violence where they're coming back to the home, or they could be a danger to the community at large, but also to that specific.
That's fantastic. I think that's such a great practice. And I think that I just imagine like people getting phone calls like after something traumatic happens and you just don't know like who to talk to or who to call. So I just wanted, like, while you're saying that, I'm like, answer those weird phone calls that you get when something happens, because the resources, I think that, making cold calls is such an interesting thing these days, but that's fantastic that you guys are reaching out right away. I think the earlier the better when it comes to it. And that's one of the reasons why we do these lunch and learns, is so that they can find that information right away and figure out like what needs to be done. So there's a comment that is asking, when your office does not have additional services, whom do you send the clients?
For our office? So what type of services?
It doesn't mention. It just says it does not have additional services, maybe like availability, if they don't have availability.
So the type of services that we provide directly would be liaising in court, assisting through the process of actual court proceeding. If they're talking about getting therapy and those kinds of things, we have a contract through a grant. So there is a service provider that that's where the contract is through. But if it's just services through the actual process of the prosecution, we are always going to have those services. There's never going to be a time where we're going to say, sorry, we can't help you. That will never happen.
Okay, so they verified here, services include housing, jobs, and counseling. So, Jamie, you spoke to counseling for St. Mary's. It might not hold true for all the counties. So, to the person commenting, you know, it could hold differently for your county. If you find that your county does not have services, please feel free to reach out to MCVRC so we can assist. As far as jobs and housing, do you have any assistance in that capacity, Jamie?
Don't have any specific assistance in that capacity. That is a very interesting thought, and that would be extremely helpful. That is something to explore. If we could come up with some kind of programming for grants, I think that's wonderful. I know there are places like the Bernie House, I think they're in Montgomery County and in Anne Arundel County, where they provide housing for victims of crime, I think specifically domestic violence. So there are resources that an individual can locate, but there is no specific location in St. Mary's where that is available.
And again, yeah, I always got to throw that. Our advocates at MCVRC, they know so many different things. The way that we're set up is based on county. Some advocates take in several counties, but they know all the ins and outs of different nonprofits that we can partner with and connect and reference and all those good things. So if you're finding yourself at a loss, please feel free to reach out to MCVRC, and they will try to connect you with you know, the appropriate resources. Did I say all that, Alondra? Did you?
Yep.
She's
You
like,
took it right out of my mouth. We have 8 advocates here at MCVRC. Each one is dedicated to a specific county. So one of the main roles that we do is that we connect you guys with resources. If that is housing, if that is relocating, if that is assisting with compensation, you know, we're here to locate that and help you with the best way that we can.
and if a victim does not want to have a case set, how do I get to object?
All right, so for St. Mary's, I can't comment on any other county, but if a victim does not want to have the case set it, we almost 100% of the time will not do something if a victim doesn't want us to. So most of the time, well, let me take a step back. 100% of the time we communicate with the victims, and the victim lets us know what they want to see happen. We will more than likely try to come up with that kind of outcome. Now, sometimes crime victims can go either way. Some of them will say, and as many of you well know, the circle of domestic violence, depending on where the victim is in that circle, sometimes they come in and on, you know, day one, they might say, I really want to go for this case. On day 78, they might say, I want to drop all the charges. What I told the police was not true. Just drop it. And then, you know, day 102, they might say, okay, now I want you guys to put him in jail. So we have to kind of track that information, and we have to really evaluate the case. We listen to what the victim has to say, but we also have to represent the community at large. We're concerned about the safety for not just the victim, but also the community. So what we look at is the allegations of the offense, the prior criminal history, and any other information that are indicators. So if the victim were to come to our office, come to my office, in our office, say, I do not want to set, you can imagine that the prosecutor will say, well, I'm going to disregard what you think, and we're going to set it anyway. Now, if there's an instance where, you know, things happen and for whatever reason there are, like, another witness is unavailable and the state asks for a postponement and that's denied, then that might be an instance where the state has no choice, because either they're forced to go forward with an unprovable case on that day, or they can take the set if the defendant's willing to take it. So sometimes there are instances where we'll say, Your Honor, it's my understanding that the civilian witness that we need for this case is unavailable. Can we ask for a postponement? We couldn't prove the case without it. It's my understanding that they are, you know, they have the flu and they can't come to court. They're at the doctor's right now. And if the court says, no, state, your postponement is denied, and the defense, they could say, well, I want a trial today. And if it truly was not a reason for us to go forward, like we couldn't prove the case, then it would be a not guilty, or it would be, well, how about this set with these conditions that there's no contact with the victim or whatever the victim is requesting, or abuser intervention program, or other conditions, community service, do not return. There are other ways that we can come up with a solution where we can try to get justice for the victim and the community for that day. So each case is different, they're very fact specific, and it's also specific based upon what resources are available, what witnesses are there, and what evidence we have.
And can you break down what a STEP is for me?
You're breaking up, Sam.
You're breaking up. I couldn't hear what you said.
I think she asked you to explain to our viewers what a STET is exactly.
Sure. A STET is an action that the state can request. It's a motion. So the state can move to place a matter on the STET docket. So it's essentially a motion to the court. And what we would say is, Your Honor, the state is moving to place the matter on the STET docket with the conditions of, and we can come up with whatever conditions they are. So it has to be a motion that's granted by